Let me give you a quick rundown of the New York Giants and what to expect. They had one of the weirdest stats of all time last year. So the New York Giants are the first team in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns and not give up a touchdown, but still lose. So if you heard me right on that, they scored 3 touchdowns last weekend. They did not give up a touchdown, but they lost 21-18 last week to the Washington Commanders. So they lost their kicker on the opening kickoff last week. So they tried to bring in. Do you remember Jamie Gillen, the Browns' former punter, the Scottish Hammer or whatever? So he's their punter. They tried to bring him in for an extra point attempt, failed miserably. So they went for 2 and just didn't get it the other 2 times. So they ended up losing. Washington last week scored 7 field goals, so 21 points, and they beat Washington, or they beat the Giants, 21-18 last week. So that to me was a mind-blowing stat. First team ever in NFL history to score 3 touchdowns, not give one up, and still lose. So that's the team you're facing this week. Those are actually your next 2 opponents in Washington and New York.
I mean, it is called football, so if you lose games based on the kicker, that's kind of fitting.
And it really is, and it shows you how important the kicker is. And we've known that on both ends, with Dawson being one of the best ever. Now you got another reliable one in Hopkins, but we've also had some bad ones over the years too. Yeah, a few in there. So the New York Giants are led by head coach Brian Daboll. The all-time history of this matchup, 28, 22, and 2, the Browns lead. So this is the 53rd game all time. The last time they played was actually on Monday Night Football during the COVID year. The Browns won that game 22-6 with Baker Mayfield in New York on Monday Night Football. So again, this team is 0-2. They've lost to Minnesota opening week, got blown out, and last week lost a close one to Washington. Their offense right now is consistently below average. So they are 24th overall in offense, 272 yards a game. They are 24th in rushing, 101 yards a game. They are 24th in passing, 171 yards a game. So 24th overall on offense, not great. They've only scored 12 points a game through the first 2 weeks. So 24 points total, which is 31st in the league. So this is a team that doesn't put a lot of fear into you. The Browns should have one of the better defenses, and they're playing one of the worst offenses in the league. So I'd expect big things out of the Browns defense this week. And some, if you want to call them X factors for the Giants, some people to look out for. We obviously know Daniel Jones, their quarterback, known by Danny Dimes, but he is only 54% completion percentage this year, 364 yards through 2 games, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Their big play guy, who was, I believe, the number 6 or 7 pick in the draft this year, is Malik Neighbors. He is the one guy on their team that does put some worry into me. He has 193 yards in his first 2 games as a rookie. Last week, he had 18 targets, and he had 10 catches for 127 yards. So the Browns aren't going to look to me for advice, but if I have one piece of advice for the Cleveland Browns, double Malik Neighbors this week. Put on either Martin Emerson or Denzel Ward on him, and then have a safety over the top, and then take your chances one-on-one with the other guys. That's my best advice for the Browns. And with our pass rush versus they have an average offensive line, I think the Browns, you take away Malik Neighbors, you should be fine in this game. So they have Devin Singletary, who's a decent running back, did have 96 rushing yards last week on 16 carries, but again, against a bad Washington defense. So this year, total 35 carries, 216 yards. So he's averaging over 100 yards a game. But this defense, flipping it to the New York Giants defense, they're led by Dexter Lawrence, who's a really good player, Brian Burns, who they picked up from a trade. They have Kayvon Thibodeau, former top pick in the draft. So their defensive line is pretty solid, but they are not this juggernaut of a defense. They have a very, I would say, one of the worst secondaries in the entire league. The only player of note to me was Jason Pinnock, who's a safety, but he's more of like a good tackler, helps in the run game. He is not great in coverage. So no one in this New York Giants secondary scares me. So I would expect, again, a big game from Amari Cooper, a decent to above average game from Deshaun Watson. Maybe get Jerry Jeudy going. Maybe you get, some of your other guys going that maybe haven't picked it up so much so far this year. Elijah Moore also looked decent against Jacksonville last week. So, maybe the Browns start getting that passing game going a little bit. I don't think it's too much to ask for 200 yards passing a game. So I think the Browns, expect that 200 to 250 yard passing game. If we get something more than that, that's great. But this is a team we should dominate their offense and put the Browns offense in formidable situations. So
yeah, my confidence is in linebackers and our defensive backs.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's going to be the key to this game. Even if we don't blow it up on the offensive side, shutting their offense down completely, because they're mediocre at best.
Right.
And so if we can keep them scoring low, we can, take our time. I honestly think that if you come out of this 2-1 and you breathe some life into that offense, like it's going to have the world of difference for the rest of the schedule.
No doubt. And you had mentioned the linebackers and defensive backs. Linebackers looked good last week. Secondary looked good last week, but we didn't even mention like possibly the best player in the NFL is on your defensive line.
Yep.
So he is an absolute game wrecker. So if he gets after them, that just makes your linebacking core and your secondary that much better. So, so we'll see what happens. But here's a look this week. The Browns, as of this morning, were 6.5 point favorites, minus 120. With that so it's juiced pretty decently on a 6.5 point spread. So Browns getting some action there. The total is only 38.5. So Vegas not expecting a high scoring game in this. Browns 1-1 versus the 0-2 New York Giants this week. So that's a look at that spread.